Let me move some stuff out of the way here. Um, what should I show you? Let me do this. See if I can open up a progressive aligner doctor portal and pull that down for you to look at.
Okay.
Here's well here, let me log out of this one and log into my own so that I don't share
Okay.
private information. Hang out.
Okay. Yeah, let me see if I can log in on the computer. See.
Okay, here I'll show this to you. So when I'm going to my
Try to, okay. Uh,
okay, so I went to my progressive aligner doctor portal. So this looks familiar to you, right?
yes, it does.
Okay, so what you want to do from here is let's say you have a specific patient that you want to look at
Mm-hmm.
staging. So you have patients that have a draft. So like
Yeah.
here's one that is waiting. Like I've already submitted these are mostly test cases here, but I've submitted it and we've gotten back staging. So all I did was click on the patient and it went right to this staging setup.
Okay.
And this is where I can look at the progressive aligner setup. Let me close this. Right. So this is what you're looking for, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So the way I got there was from the workbench. You can see I have patients where there may be action required. So let's say I have a draft that I haven't completed. It'll tell me that I need to finish the draft. Or here it says, hey, you've got two setups for patients that are waiting for approval. And so
Okay.
I got there by clicking on the patient name and it opened up a new window where I could go view that patient setup. But even if I have a patient who's in treatment, like let's say I go to a
Exactly.
patient,
The patient in treatment is where I need to know how
yeah.
to.
So let's say I go to a patient who's already in treatment where they've already shipped the aligner. I still just want to click the patient's name.
Mm-hmm.
And when you click the patient's name, it takes you to basically the doctor portal for that patient. So now I'm only looking at this one patient and I can see that I have my primary that was approved and shipped. I have a refinement phase that was approved and shipped. If I have more refinements available, those are right here. If I want to order retainers, I would order it here, but I've already ordered everything for this particular case. But this is where I can go back and look at the very first setup, or I can look at one of the refinement setups. So somebody who's in treatment, the same way to get to their case is you're going to go from the workbench, click
Yes.
click on in treatment, and then here's your list of patients that are either waiting approval or are in treatment. And to go see anything on any of these patients, you just have to click their name. And then it takes you to where you can see primary, refinement phase two. Click on any one of those and it will open up the setup for that patient. See that?
Oh, and that is the where I want to get to, and I was not able to.
Yeah. So just click on the patient names.
Okay, I got all the patient's name. Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yes.
Maybe play with it while we're talking here. And if that doesn't work, then let me know
Okay,
and
I will. I
we'll
will.
help
Thank
you further. Yeah.
you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for joining us, doctors. So, I want to take other questions. What other questions do you guys have? Dr. Ibrahim or Dr. Zhu, Dr. Gayatri, any other questions that you have about Medit Ortho Suite? I think we have another doctor joining us, Dr. Zhang. Any questions that you guys have working with Medit Ortho Suite or even progressive aligners for that matter that you would like me to answer before we start looking at a case or two? Hi, Dr. Lorenz. How are you?
Doing
Thanks for
well. How are you?
Good. Good. Thanks for joining, and I appreciate you turning on your camera. That's nice to see some people here. We were just answering questions. Do you have any specific questions about Meta Ortho Suite or any aligners you're working with, progressive aligners or anything that we can answer?
Well, I just ordered my first set of 10 and I thought I asked for a template and they when I went on my dashboard, they said no template ordered, so I had to call them. I didn't know uh why it didn't, register.
Yeah. Let me show you that process really quick. We can get that remedied for that one patient and get those sent to you. Or do you have the ability to now at this point it'd be easier just to order them. But let me show you a case really quick and show you how to get there. Hang on just a second. Let me
Yeah,
close
I
this.
emailed the regional manager and he said he would take care of it. So
Okay, perfect.
that's
So
fine,
something
but
gets
I
taken care of. Let me just show you a case so that you can make sure that when you are placing orders that you hang on just a second. So when you're sharing it or when you're ordering a case, you make sure to get everything. So let me open a case here really quick. I'll pull it onto my screen for you just a second. All right, so and just so nobody's confused, there is a difference between Medit aligners and progressive aligners. So right now, like previously, we were answering a question for Christian about progressive aligners, but we're looking at Medit aligners right now. So from Medit Ortho Suite, if I'm going to go order this setup right here, I'm going to click the complete button right here. We're going to say order Medit aligners. And right here, this include attachment toggle is what's going to determine whether or not you get attachments on the actual like models so that there's an attachment template. Normally, though, when you have this toggle on, which means that you do have attachments in your case, see how that little blue right here, attachment templates, how that lights up and turns on and off. So normally, by default, if I placed attachments on the case and I have auxiliary elements turned on, then when I go to order the case, it's going to automatically tell me that there's, this include attachments will be turned on. And that should turn on this attachment template right here. But just to verify before I order, I can click here. And what this is showing me is that I have a maxilla attachment template and a mandible attachment template, and they're set for stage 0, which would mean I would put them on at the start of the case because stage 1 has got movement. So stage 1, the teeth have already moved from their start position. So I want the attachment templates from stage 0, where kind of the start position of the teeth. So as long as you see these checked right here, then you should
Uh-huh.
be getting attachment templates. And that may, I know there's several different versions. You might have had a previous version. So always make sure that you've updated to the most recent version of the software. The way to check that, it usually alerts you if you don't have the most recent version, but the way you check that is you go in Medit link to your app box and make sure that the Medit Ortho Suite is installed. If there's a new version, it will have a little like live button there to be able to install it. So always make sure that you have the most recent version of Medit Ortho Suite because it was a little bit more confusing how to make sure that your template was getting ordered in previous versions. But now it should look like this, where it automatically lights up. And if you want to check it, you can see here that you have a maxillary and mandible attachment template. Then if I wanted, for example, like this case, you can see down here that there's 24 active upper aligners and only 20 active lower. So let's say I wanted to order 2 passive in the lower so that I could have the patient keep wearing the lower aligners while I'm finishing in the upper. Then I would go to passive aligners and I click mandible and I want them for stage 20. So I'm gonna order 20, 20. That would give me 2 additional passive aligners in the lower arch for the patient at stage 20. So it's a little bit confusing because it almost seems like you're entering numerical quantities right here. Like I want 20 passive aligners, but really these are stage numbers. And so I have 1 maxillary template and 1 mandible template at stage 0. And then I have 2 mandible passive aligners at stage 20. And then if I wanted a retainer, I could say 20 in the mandible and 24 in the maxilla. Those are all stage numbers. They're going to release another version of this in, I think, April, where they're even going to make this more clear. But for right now, that's what it looks like if you update to the most recent version. So this is where if you want to make sure you're getting templates or passive aligners or retainers, this is where you order that. And then before you check out, so let me get rid of those. When you go to check out, it should show you, let's see what it shows just a second. It should show you how many aligners you're buying and how many other things like templates or retainers or things like that. And they're all at $18 per arch in the US because that's the only place it's available right now. We're getting very close to it being available in lots of places worldwide. We just have to get some regulatory clearance. So let's give this just a second so I can show you the checkout page.
Dr. Collins, is there a way to adjust the size of the attachments here?
Yeah, I'll show you that in just a second. See if this is going to work. I might have crashed it. Sometimes when I'm on Zoom, if things don't check out well. Anyway, when you go to check out, it should give you a list also of what you're buying. Oh, here we go. So here you can see I've got 24 aligners for the upper. I've got 20 aligners for the lower. I've got a maxillary template and a mandibular template. So this case, you can already see that I have aligners, active aligners, upper and lower, and then I have an attachment template for the maxillary and mandible. So that's another place where you can check it as you're checking out. Okay. So your question, Doctor, about changing attachments, the way that we do any modifications, which we're going to do on pretty much every case, whenever you come from the simulation, the point of the simulation is to get yourself close, like maybe 90% of the way there, but you're going to do always some customization here. And the place to do the customization is going to be this little button right here that says treatment refinement. So when we click that, it takes us into, what if you're using another system would be kind of similar to 3D Doctor edit tools. And so while we're here in this treatment refinement, I have 4 different kind of modes or tools that I can shift into up on the top. One is tooth movements. So if I'm here, this is where I have control over moving that tooth. Now yours might look slightly different. I have the most recent version that hasn't been released. It'll be released pretty soon here, but you can see I have all these little arrows. You might only have your tooth light up and you have to move things, either by grabbing the tooth or clicking over here on this movement control tab. So this is where we adjust the final positions of the teeth. And then the one right next to it is where we edit the IPR and the spacing. So if I want to add or remove IPR, I just click this little circle in between teeth and I can add spacing, or I can remove spacing, or I can add IPR. Sometimes when I do a tooth adjustment, for example, if I change the angulation of the tooth, it will create some IPR on one side and some space on the other side. And I could just go move the tooth mesial or distal to fix that, or I like to just quickly click up here on the edit IPR and then just delete the IPR and delete the space that it created, and then it will put the tooth back in the correct position. The next button up here is the attachments or auxiliaries. So this is the one you have to click to be able to edit your attachments. So any particular attachment, I can click on that attachment and I can change its orientation. I can change its position. I can change its orientation, or I can change its size. So I'm changing its size by doing a right click. So if I go to the attachment and I do a left click, it lets me change its orientation. So for example, if I want to try to angle it to get more surface area on one side versus the other, or maybe if I'm like extruding this tooth and I want to, let me change the view here. If I'm extruding this tooth, so I want to angle it more like an extrusion attachment, see how I can change the orientation of the attachment like that. So you can change the position on the tooth. You can change the orientation, or by doing a right click on it, you can change the size. So there I went from a medium to a large. or I can delete it altogether. And then if I click the tooth, then I can add any one of these that I want. So I can add the attachment back, change its size. Okay, so, and then the other thing that you have to add here is you're able to add rotation ridges if you want. So sometimes like on lower incisors or upper incisors, I might choose to not put an attachment. Like here's a tooth that has a crown on it. And maybe I don't want to bond an attachment to that tooth, but maybe the tooth is rotating. I'm going to click back over to tooth movement so I can show you what this tooth is doing. By clicking on and off of, not on the model, my cursor has to be over in the gray space somewhere. And if I click with a left click, you can see the before and after position of those teeth. So that tooth is not really rotating too much, but let's say it is, it's got a little bit of a distal rotation. So let's say that I want to reinforce that. Then when I'm over here in the attachment mode, one of the things that I can add are pressure points or rotation ridges. So I can put a rotation ridge out here, say on the facial, and I can add another one and drag it over here to the lingual side and put those on opposing sides so that now, and these have different sizes too. I can do large, I can do small. What these do is these apply pressure in the aligner to make sure that the tooth is feeling the pressure in the correct area to accomplish the rotation. So it's like a little ridge on the inside of the aligner that's pushing on the tooth to create a little bit of a rotation correction there. So those can be handy. There's torque ridges. So let's say that I'm putting torque onto a tooth, lingual torque. I can put little pressure points up at the gum line here, and I can change their size. That would put extra pressure on the root to try to push the root more lingual. For example, if I'm trying to add lingual root torque. So that's what those are. The other thing you can add is bite ramps. So you can see I just added a bite ramp to this upper incisor. And then I want to reposition that maybe a little bit more incisally. Let's put one on this tooth as well. And you can see now if I order this aligner is going to have lingual bite ramps. So for in a deep bite case, and I want to make sure the patient's not biting on the aligners in the back, I can add those little bite ramps. And these have different sizes as well. So if I do a right click, just like an attachment, I can make those large. So you can see how that large one projects out further. So if the patient has more overjet, it makes it be able to hit that lower tooth with more overjet. So you can add bite ramps. What else do we have here? You've also got button cutouts. So let's say you want to do some class 2 elastics on a case. You're going to click on the molar and put this button cutout. And this also has sizes. So I'm going to right click this one and choose large. And maybe I'll position it a little bit closer to the mesial side of that tooth. And then maybe I just want to have a slit in the aligner instead of putting a button on the upper canine. So I can click there and put the little slit in the aligner up there. So you have the ability to add rotation ridges, torque ridges, all kinds of different attachments, and button cutouts and lingual bite ramps. And then once they're on the teeth, you can adjust positions, you can adjust orientations, and you can adjust sizes. So there's a lot of options down here of different things that you can use in your cases to customize. Did that answer your question?
Yes, doctor. And I have one more question.
Yeah.
How do you check, the rate of movement of the tooth as it's moving? Do you have a chart here?
Yes, good question. Let me show that to you. So a couple different things with rate of tooth movement. I have to process the changes I just made first here. So let me go ahead and process those. Now, my version of the software's got a little hiccup in it where I need to reload it after I process that. So let me reload it really quick. So tooth movements, this little settings tool right here, if I click that, this allows me to adjust the speed of the arch. So if I want to move teeth faster or slower in either of the arches, I can change the linear speed of each stage here. Right now it's set at 0.25 millimeters per stage. Or I can change the degree of rotation. So if I want teeth to rotate more slowly at say 1 degree or 1.5 degrees per aligner, I can change those here. And any change I make here will then be recalculated back into the staging when I confirm that. You have on the right side, you have two different tools. One is the tooth movement data. If I click that, it does open up a chart. And I can look at the upper or the lower so that I can look at the tooth movements. Now, these are just total tooth movements. So I don't have a tool right now that shows each stage and how much is moving per each stage. I just have the total amount of movement here. And I can look at it from the root apex or from the crown or from the center of resistance. Another option that I have for looking at tooth movement is, let me close that up. I can come back into this treatment refinement mode. And if I click on any given tooth, it shows me over here in movement controls the total movements for that particular tooth. So this has got, 13 degrees of inclination change, 5 degrees of angulation change, this much rotation, this much translation. But what they don't show right now is I can't go from like click on stage 2 to click on stage 3 and see what changed between those two stages. So I only am able to see total movement applied to the tooth, or I can go and see the rate at which the movements are being applied, either linear or rotational. Okay.
Thank you, doctor.
There was something else I was going to show you. Let me reload this. The other thing you have here is a Bolton analysis. So over here on the right side, underneath the tooth movement chart is a Bolton analysis chart. And what's cool about this is if you have IPR, it'll show you your Bolton discrepancy before the IPR is applied. And if you toggle this, it will show you your Bolton discrepancy after your IPR is applied. So that's kind of nice to be able to see with and without the IPR. And the other thing that you have over here is superimposition. So when you're looking at your setup, you can look at the superimposition. You also have, it's kind of blocked out right here because of my screen, the way it's magnifying it. But underneath this little icon right here is an occlusion relationship. So I can click that and actually see the occlusal relationship too if I want to make sure I haven't created any heavy contacts. This is a place where before you order, you can go and say, oh, I want to intrude that tooth a little bit. Okay, so anything you see you want to change, you would go back over here to your treatment refinement. And while you're in treatment refinement mode, you still have all these same tools. So you have your occlusal relationship tool, your superimposition tool, your Bolton analysis, and your tooth movement data. But then this is where you have your ability to move teeth to final position, change your IPR, change your attachments. And this is the newest version of the arch form. You guys don't have this yet. In your version of the arch form, all it allows you to do is, and let me turn off the occlusal. So what you guys have is the ability to do this right here, symmetrical expansion per arch. What the new version that will come out in a month or two will have are these individual points where you can actually manipulate the arch form in different spots. So this is coming, and you can either have it be symmetrical, you can have the opposing arch match your changes or not. So there's some nice, so I find this helpful. For example, if I have a case where, let me reset that. So let's say I have a case where I don't really like the overjet, and I want to pull one side in a little bit and pull one side out a little bit. This is where I can come and turn it off symmetrical, turn off match opposing, and I can tease this lower side out just a little bit and maybe tease this side in a little bit to try to match what's going on in the upper. And so that can be a pretty helpful tool when you just don't want to move every single tooth, but you want to change the arch form a little bit. So that's coming. Currently, all you guys have, though, is the one to be able to do a little bit of expansion or constriction, but there's more exciting stuff coming. All right, what else can I show you? Any other questions before we look at a case, just from the things I've been showing you here?
Doctor, I have a question about where you want the center of rotation, where you're doing inclination changes. Can you go over that?
That's a really good question. Let me show you that because I find this really helpful when I'm making adjustments. So let's just look at this upper tooth, for example, right here. Let me turn off the lower. Say I want to make an angulation change to this tooth right here. Watch how different the movements are. So let's go to angulation. Let's go to this tooth on angulation change. Watch how the tooth moves differently in these three different choices that I have. So if we keep it at center of resistance, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's come back to this tooth. I'll just grab the tooth and show you. Watch how the tooth moves. This is what it looks like when it's moving through the center of resistance. Now let's switch it to the root apex and watch it. That looks different, doesn't it? And watch how different it looks when I switch it to, I kind of think of it as like I'm locking the incisal edge, and watch this one. So I like, when I'm changing angulation, I kind of like locking the crown and like moving the root. So say, for example, let's find one that's looks kind of goofy that needs to be fixed. Where's one I don't like the angulation of? This is not a very good example. I think I've already fixed most of the angulation problems here, but oh no, here's a good example. So that canine right there, here's the start position and there's the final position. I don't like the angulation change on that canine right there. So if I take this canine and I lock it from the crown, I can put, whoops, I'm on extrude and intrude. I would need to change my tool here to angulation. So when I lock the crown, it's a little bit easier for me to visually get that root underneath it the way I want it to. And then again, I can either grab the tooth and, say put it on mesial distal translation and scoot it back over, or it's a little bit faster for me to just quickly go up and click IPR, delete the space, delete the IPR, and now I was able to get the angulation change without taking very much time to do that. I like to go through each tooth and just click on each tooth and look at the movements. I'm looking at the values over here, and if there's a big angulation change, I kind of want to make sure that that's actually something that's needed. So let's just focus on this one tooth right here. And it's got a pretty big value for angulation change, but it kind of needs that. Or whoops, didn't mean to do that one. Let's go back again to angulation. And let's look at, where does that tooth look like it's straight? And if making it look straight to me reduces that value, then I like that because that bigger angulation value is something that's hard for the aligner to do. So if I make the tooth look more straight and it takes the value from 13 or 14 down to 9, then that was a worthwhile adjustment because that's not as predictable anyway. So this now becomes more predictable treatment and I like the result more. Does that make sense? So let's say if I want to do a change in the buccal lingual, watch the difference between me setting it at the root apex. This would be the most predictable way to move that tooth. I'm going to undo that because I moved the whole tooth bodily to the buccal. So when you're moving the whole tooth bodily, buccal or lingual, it doesn't really matter where you have that point set. So watch if I move that buccal or lingual And then if I change it down here, it doesn't really change how the tooth moves. So these big buccal, lingual, or mesial distal movements don't matter down here. But if I'm going to do an inclination change, watch the difference between having it set at the root apex, where it looks more just like let's move it where you can see it. Where it looks more like I'm just tipping the crown of the tooth versus setting it this way, where it looks like I'm tipping the root. So if I want to look at the tooth and go, hey, it looks like we have, like, I need a little bit more labial root torque, or I need a little bit more lingual root torque, then it's easier for me to lock the crown and change the root to what looks right to me. But if I just want to tip that tooth out a little bit, so sometimes I'll do this on, say, for example, I think I have my overjets a little bit tight in the back. Like, let's take this tooth right here. I'll lock it down at the root apex and then tip that tooth out to the buccal just a little bit by clicking these little buttons here. You can see it tipping out. Here, watch the tooth, and you can see the tooth tipping in or out. And that's going to be a more predictable movement because I've locked the apex down and I'm just tipping that crown out. So if I want to just tip crowns out, I like to lock the apex down and then just tip the crown. But if I need to get more torque or less torque, like let's say I feel like those upper incisors have got too much lingual root torque. So it started here and it's finishing there, and I'm like, oh, that's too much lingual root torque being applied. I can either reduce the value by selecting it and saying it hits at 14. I want to go type in, say, half that. Let's type in 7 and hit enter. And you saw up here how it changed the amount of torque on that tooth, but it also changed the position of that tooth. So let me show you an easier way to change the torque on that tooth, and that would be to lock down the crown. Whoops. Lock down the crown on that tooth, and then just come either manually adjust it or use the buttons to reduce it. So here, whoops, I hit it the wrong way. I went to 20. So I would think I was at like 14. So if you watch the torque on that tooth, right here, kind of watch the gum line right there, and I'll click the value down. Do you see how it's changing the torque on that tooth? And so now if you toggle on and off and you look at how it's moving that tooth, you go, oh, I like that better. That looks like a more realistic amount of torque than what I was getting before. So let's look at the other side. And look at this tooth and look at the amount of torque being applied, all that lingual root torque. So I'm going to lock down the crown, and I'm just going to reduce the amount of lingual root torque being applied. And see how it's changing. So these are really helpful, I find, for angulation and inclination, changing how it's moving, either locking down the incisal edge so that I can move the apex, or locking down the apex so that I can tip the incisal edge in or out. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and just play around with it. It's just one of those things where, like, the better you get at this page right here of being able to move the teeth around the way you want, the faster you're going to get at doing these cases. So I like, when I'm looking at these, what I'm doing is I'm toggling on and off the screen. So I have to click the tooth movement in order to get that to happen. So I toggle, and anything that just looks weird to me, like that tooth right there looks like it's moving a lot, I might just click on that tooth and see what my values are over here. And I know that the values that are hard are these angulation changes, rotation, and torque, and extrusions, right? So if I look at the angulation change, I'm like, okay, well, there's a 20, or the inclination change, there's a 20-degree inclination change. Do I need that on this tooth? Well, I guess I do, because if you look at that tooth, let's just click off of it here. Click back there. Watch this tooth. That tooth starts out very tipped to the lingual. And so it does need that much of an inclination change, because I want this patient to have a nice broad smile. And it is tipped lingually to begin with, and there's not enough overjet there. So I actually do want that 20 degrees of inclination change. But what about this 11 or 12 degrees of angulation change? Do I need that? Let's look at that. I don't know that I necessarily need that angulation change. So why don't we dial that one down a little bit? So let's say that I'm going to put, let's just go half of it. Let's go 5 and hit enter. See how that creates IPR in space? It's easier for me to just go click the IPR, delete the IPR, delete the space, and then go back to my tooth movements and look at that. And if I go, oh, that actually looks better. I still have that big inclination change because it's going from the lingual to the buccal, but it really didn't need that much of an angulation change. So I reduced that value and made it more predictable, and it looks better in my opinion. So I like that. And then maybe there's a little bit too much intrusion there. So maybe I'll bring that down just a little bit. And now all of a sudden that tooth, which was jumping out at me as being a tooth that was just moving a lot, now looks a lot more realistic. So I like to just toggle on and off and look for teeth that just look like they're jumping around a lot and look at the value and say, do I need that much? Like this one's moving around a lot. And I'm like, oh, well, there's a big value right there. 48-degree rotation. Holy smokes. Do we need that much rotation? Let's look at it. I don't think we need, I don't think we need that much rotation, that tooth. In fact, it's over rotated. So I definitely would want to have a little bit of a overcorrection, but that's probably too much of an overcorrection. So let's dial that back. Let's put it in the 25-degree range. Now that looks a lot better. So rather than click through every tooth and look for large numbers, I just am kind of looking and watching at what's jumping out to my eye as I look at it from different views. And if I see something that's jumping out, then I'm like, oh, that's crazy. I don't need that much of that particular thing. Now, the other thing that we've been doing on our cases that I want to show you guys is we're used to thinking that the way that Invisalign and other aligner companies have got us programmed to think is that we have to get everything perfect at the start of a case. But we all know that when we treat with braces, we do our best to put the braces on straight. But you know that, hey, in 6 months or whatever, if or any way along the way where I see a tooth not moving the way I want it to, I'm just going to take the bracket off and change its position on the tooth. Or I might put a bend in the wire when in finishing. You know, it's pretty impossible to get those brackets on so perfect that everything aligns perfectly. You know, you're just going to get your brackets on and get going and do the best that you can and just make sure everything's moving in the right direction. So we don't really, I think of it like golfing. You know, when you're sitting up there to tee off at a fairway, it's pretty rare that you take one hit and get the ball all the way into the hole. It usually takes a series of strokes to be able to get the ball into the hole. And so you think about your aligner cases in this same way, especially because you're going to be paying for these aligners per aligner. And we do have a price cap for progressive grads. So if you're a POS graduate, you will have each case price capped at $1,200. So you won't go more than that, you know, which is actually a really great deal. But you really don't want to order a bunch of aligners and throw them away. So what I do is rather than spend all the time, it's kind of like if you're teeing off at the fairway, you're not really thinking about putting. You're just trying to get the ball as close to the hole as possible, or maybe not even that. Maybe you have a goal to get the ball to a certain spot on the fairway where you're then going to hit another time, and then you're going to be putting after that. And so you look at this and go, hey, my first set of aligners is just basically open up the case, start to spread out the teeth, and basically start to level a line. It's kind of like what you'd be doing in your night tie wires. And this isn't probably a great case example, but it's a decent case example where you go, I'm not going to worry about every little detail. Like I could go and spend a lot of time trying to fine tune this tooth right here and get it just perfect where I like every little detail about how it's angled and positioned and rotated. But that's putting, right? That's literally like trying to look at every little blade of grass and see if you can put the ball into the hole when you're really close to it. So those little details would be better adjusted when we get to our final stage of aligners. So I want you guys to start thinking with Medit aligners as let's get the case moving in the right direction, and let's not spend too long initially getting every little detail correct because you're not going to use that first set of aligners completely. So for example, in this case, let me just process all these changes that we've made. Let me reload it. Let's say I have 22 aligners. I'm going to look at that and go, you know what? Rather than order 22 aligner stages, why don't we order like 10 or 12 or somewhere around there? Because one, it gives me a chance to see how the patient compliance is. Have you guys ever ordered aligners and find out the patient wasn't very compliant and you've already paid like $2,000 towards your aligner lab bill, and then the patient's not wearing the aligners well, and you figure that out after 6 months, and then you switch over to brackets, but you can't get your aligner lab bill or your feedback. So this gives you a chance to say, let's order 10 aligners and see how things are going. And look at how much it opens up the case. Now, when you have all of this overlap between the teeth, there's a lot of the tooth that's not even visible to the scanner. And if you were to go 10 aligners, you actually now have opened up spaces. So where now the aligner can actually see all of the anatomy of the teeth, not the aligner, the scanner. So if you go back in after 10 or 11 or 12 aligner stages and rescan your next set of aligners, because you're going to set up the case, your next set is actually going to be more efficient because it's going to be able to actually have the real anatomy of all of these interproximal spaces and embrasures that initially were all covered up. The scanner couldn't see it, and the computer just had to generate these interproximal surfaces. And we don't realize that in our aligner cases, a lot of these interproximal surfaces are computer generated surfaces. So anywhere where the teeth are overlapping, that surface is not visible to your scanner. So the computer has to invent or create a computer generated interproximal surface. And now the teeth are and this is one of the reasons why with Medit aligners, it's programmed to open up more spaces between the teeth before it starts rotating. It's to compensate for the fact that it's invented these spaces in between here. It's invented those interproximal surfaces. And that's where a lot of our aligner cases don't actually work the way we want them to, is because these little collisions in between interproximal are coming from the fact that it's computer generated tooth anatomy. Once we get the case opened up, so let's say this is our first stroke from the fairway. So we tee off and we go to about here. Then we recalculate. So we take a new scan and we re-simulate the case. And from there, we start to dial in a little bit more of the final details. And then we might get one more round of 10. And then I would say at that point, I'm going to do my putting. And that last set of aligners is going to be where I really dial in the occlusion. So I'm going to turn on the occlusion. So it's like my first set of aligners, I just want to make sure everything is moving in the right direction. Everything's opening up. Kind of what I would expect to happen when I put nickel titanium wire into an arch form. And I just want everything to start to unravel. And then a lot of times initially we forget to do, like this isn't a good example, but a case where say that the incisor edges are all irregularly worn. Once we've gotten to this point, it's a lot easier now to go in and start refining the anatomy of the incisal edges, the cusp tips, and really start to make the case look nice so that as you start to dial in those final details, you have straight incisal edges, you have gotten rid of any irregularly worn anatomy. And this is even on the cases where you're doing IPR, you can postpone the IPR and wait until you go to this first stage here. Go and do your IPR that you have planned. And let me show you, for example, let's go on this case and let's put some IPR in here. So let's add IPR in a few spaces. Let me recalculate it. You guys don't have to do this. This is just me that has to do this right now with my current version. So here I've got IPR. Look where it put the IPR. Usually it's later in the case because it's programmed to not put the IPR until the contacts are straight. So if I was to order to align stage 10 in the upper and lower, I've already got a plan based on my final positions about how much IPR I need. How cool would it be to come to this point right here, do the IPR so I can see that I want this much IPR, but let's do all of that IPR before we take a new scan. I have great access to these interproximal areas. Now when I go and rescan, instead of computer generated surfaces, because when it does IPR, it's doing it itself. It's just creating these IPR surfaces. If you guys go in and actually perform the IPR, now you actually have space between the teeth. And now when you scan, make sure you remove all the plaque and calculus and the saliva and get a nice clean scan. Now your aligners are going to fit really well because it actually has all of the detail from the IPR that you did. And now it's no longer guessing. And so as it starts to finish up the case, it actually knows exactly what every interproximal surface looks like. You've gotten a lot more of the tooth anatomy exposed to your scanner to be able to pick up just by taking that first swing off the fairway. So we're not swinging for a hole in one. We're going one set of aligners to get to a point where I can go in and refine some things a little bit, do some IPR, do it all at one time, take a new scan, and then we'll go in and re-simulate the case and basically take our next stroke. And then assume that you're going to probably need a little bit of putting at the end of the case where you just do a few more aligners to get everything just perfect. So that's the way we're thinking about these cases now, is rather than spend a whole bunch of time trying to get every little detail just perfect, that's kind of like trying to do your finishing bends in your braces cases when you're first putting your brackets on. Just get them on. We have phases of treatment. We do alignment, level and aligning, we do mechanics, and then we do finishing. So think of your aligners, instead of everything in one set of aligners, go, I'm going to order my kind of leveling and aligning, just get everything opened up. Then I'll go in and refine the tooth anatomy and do my IPR, take another scan, and I'll take that next set, which is try to get the teeth as close as I can to the final position. And then I'll have one more final phase where I go in and just detail out all of the results that I got from my previous two sets. That's a lot more efficient, effective way to do these aligners than trying to get these aligners, which initially had all this crowding and you don't actually see all these interproximal surfaces. And it allows you throughout this process to get better and better control of the teeth and have more control over the actual tooth anatomy so that you're getting that result you want at the end. Different way to think about cases. Does that make sense?
Dr. Collins, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for now, how am I using these in-house aligners is for my relapse cases or some cases which require minor tooth movements.
Yeah.
So when you want a tooth to move, first so that you have some space in the arch, for example, if there is an extraction space opened up, so you want that premolar to move back a little bit before you align the anteriors. So how do you stage which tooth moves first and then which one moves next? So do you
So
have an option?
that's a level of control that we don't have currently. They are designing the tools to allow you to say, I want this tooth to start moving at this stage, and I want this tooth to start moving at this stage. So that's not a level of control that we have right now. But let me show you a relapse case. That was actually what I was going to show you guys. And we'll just do this case quickly as we finish up here in the last 10 minutes to just show a little bit of minor tooth movement on a relapse case. Let me get it opened up and then I'll drag it down on the screen so you guys can see it. So this was a case that was treated with braces and patient had a little bit of relapse. I'm going to start the case over. So let's go back to the beginning so that you guys can see all of the steps. Okay, so here's the scan. And I guess the overjet wasn't corrected all the way on this patient. Patient was fine. But what's the concern of the patient is right now is that there's some relapse in the anterior teeth that are not perfectly aligned anymore. But more importantly, there's some relapse in these lower anterior teeth is the main concern of the patient. So let's just work the case up really quickly as a relapse case to see how I would do that. So here I've got the occlusal table set. On a case like this, it doesn't matter that much to me because I'm literally going to set all the teeth back to their initial position. So I'm going to go quickly through these steps. It is important that we have all the teeth identified properly. On every case, always make sure that all the numbers and the paint or the segmentation is correct. So here I can see that this one is not correct. So let's clean up the few that are not correct. And that one doesn't look good. The rest of those seem to be okay. So that works. Let's go on to the arch form. On the arch form, I'm not going to pay too much attention to it because, again, I'm going to reset all the teeth back to their initial position. So this doesn't really matter too much. I'm not going to change the bite. It's just a relapse case. So we'll just keep it a class 1 case. And what I'm going to choose from the simulation page, at some point, they'll give us the option to actually choose the original scan as the aligner output. So basically, you would get an aligner output with no stages because you chose the start position of the teeth. And that would allow you to go in and make your own little manual adjustments. But in this case, the closest I can get to that is going to be simulation 1.11. So let me show that to you. The very first one that pops up is 1.1, where it's aligning all of the teeth. So if I go from original scan to simulation 1.1, you can see that it's aligning all of the teeth. But this patient just wanted a little bit of relapse treatment. So I'm going to come in here and click. Interesting. I'm not sure why those lowers are advancing so much, so that's kind of interesting. It's because they're very proclined. It's a class 2 case, it looks like. All right, so anyway, I'm going to choose simulation 1.11, which only moves the upper and lower 3 to 3. So if you look at the original data compared to 1.11, you can see there's a lot less tooth movement. It's just moving 3 to 3 in the upper and lower arch. So there's the original, there's 1.11. So that's the one I'm going to select as I go out to the aligner output. And it comes up with 13 aligner stages, but I don't want all that tooth movement. So I'm going to click on this tooth refinement, turn on both arches, and I just want to get rid of all the tooth movements and go back to the start position. So I'm going to take all the teeth that are moving. Remember, I can see which ones are moving by clicking off, just kind of on the gray part of the screen. And you can see that it's upper and lower 3 to 3 that are moving. Nothing else is moving. If I hold on I have a Mac, so if I hold down the command button while I click on the teeth, I can select multiple teeth. I think if you're on a PC, you hold down the control button. And I'm going to select all of the upper and lower anterior teeth 3 to 3. And I'm going to right click. And one of my choices is go back to the initial position. So when I go back to the initial position, all of the teeth now, see if I click off the model, nothing's moving. And if I was to go ahead and calculate this out, it's going to show me an aligner setup with 0 aligner stages because there's no movements. So there's no movements, okay? So now I get to go in and make all my own little adjustments. So I'm going to go back in and say all this patient wants is just to get this little problem right here straightened out. That's all the patient wants. And I would like to just make them like a retainer that's going to help reposition those teeth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into this one tooth right here, and I'm just going to fix the rotation. And maybe I'll fix this rotation a little bit while I'm at it. This one needs a little bit more. And now you can see that that created a little bit of IPR because it doesn't have room in here. So I'm just going to come up to the IPR and delete that IPR, which opened up all of the teeth a little bit. You see how that had to open up? So everything got pushed out a little bit to create the room for that. And I can check my overjet. Oh, I still have obviously plenty of overjet because this actually didn't get corrected in the initial treatment, it looks like. But all that patient wants is that one tooth to be fixed. Okay, and maybe I'll push that forward just a little bit. So let's go and move it a little bit to the buccal. And that again created a little bit of IPR that I'll just get rid of. Remember, I'm not doing a whole set of aligners, so I don't really want to go too crazy. I just want the patient to be happy with the fact that that tooth feels straight to them. So I'll calculate that out. And it's going to probably give me like 10 aligner stages. Let me reload it here. but I don't really want 10 aligner stages. I just want to see, oh, give me 5. Okay. So it goes, all right, I have a choice. I can order these 5 aligners where it's going to push everything out a little bit, make the space, do the rotation, and then bring everything back. And if I want that, then I can go ahead and order it, and it's going to take me through that. I don't really have control over, okay, I want this tooth to move at stage 2, and I want this one to move at stage 3. I only really have control over the final positions and how quickly we're moving the teeth to get there. Here you can see I've dialed up the speed quite a bit to get a few number of aligner stages. But what if I don't even want to do aligner stages? What if I want to just see if I can get one retainer to actually get the tooth to go from here to here without going through these stages? I can just go and order. What I would do is I would come up here and say, I don't want any aligners actually. So I'm going to say 0 or just turn these off. I don't want any aligners. But what I do want is I want in the mandible, I want maybe 2 passive aligners at stage 5. So I'm going to put 5, 5, and then I want a retainer at stage 5. So what would I get if I order this? I'm going to get my final tooth positions at stage 5, but instead of going to the thick retainer, I'm going to start with 2, what it considers passive, but they're not really passive. It's going to be actually very active because I'm ordering stage 5. So I can order those 2, and I can get the thinner aligner material, which is more flexible because it'll be easier for the patient to put it on since those teeth aren't straight. And I'll have the patient wear each one of those for maybe a month. And maybe when they come in to get it, I'll go and do a little bit of just lightening of the contacts between the teeth with a little IPR strip or a little diamond strip. And I'll say, here, wear this first one for a month, because usually after a month, that aligner material is getting pretty worn out. And then I'll say after a month, switch into the other one for another month, and then come back in, and I'll go in and maybe do a little bit more of that lightening of the contacts between the teeth. And then I'll have the patient start wearing that retainer for as long as it takes to finally get that last bit of movement out. So this is a case where it's not a lot of movement, but this only wants to stage 5 treatment stages. And all I want is something that is built to look like this final stage. And I want to give the patient 2 or 3 aligner thickness retainers to wear, and then 1 thicker retainer to wear to see if I can get this tooth back in this position. Or you could just go ahead and order 5 lower aligner stages and actually have it do this little opening up space, do the rotation, and then close the space back up. Or you could just try to kind of force it on using 1. And if say that I had just taken the braces off and I had some little things that I wanted to improve, those teeth are really mobile after just 1, after you just took the braces off. So I could actually go in here and get this exactly the way I want it, every little detail just exactly the way I want it after the braces come off. And actually, because those teeth are still mobile, I could go straight to maybe just 1 aligner and then the retainer. And I actually expect that to work pretty well because the patient just got their braces off and the teeth are still ready to move. But a patient who's had the braces off for a little while, those teeth aren't just going to move that easily. So that's why I'm thinking about just giving them a retainer that's made out of aligner material and let them wear that for a couple of months until we can finally get into a thicker retainer and see if we can continue to kind of force that tooth in. So a lot of different options on a very minor little relapse case, or a case where I've just taken off the braces and I want to just do a repositioning retainer basically, but I don't want to have to do it by cutting teeth off of a model. So that didn't really answer your question, Dr. Gayatri, about how do I stage at what point the teeth move. That's a more advanced tool that they are developing, and you'll have that at some point probably this next year. Currently, we have to kind of go with whatever the auto staging is coming up with, but I have the option to change the speed, and I can decide how many aligners I want to order. I don't have to order every single stage that's showing. If I like, well, I like stage 1, 3, and 5. then I can just order stages 1, 3, and 5. Or if I like stages 1, 2, and 5, and 6, I can order 1, 2, 5, and 6. So you have a lot of flexibility on how you order them, but you still don't have that level of control like you have with, say, Blue Sky, where you're going, I want this tooth to start moving at stage 6 and this one to start moving at stage 3. Because the problem with that is that is making everything manual. And the nice thing about this is that it's all automated, meaning it's fast. And so you can set things up a lot faster, but you're also kind of stuck with the auto staging rather than having you do it all manually. And the dream is, and what they're working on right now, is being able to give us the combination of both, where you can do both manual when needed. So go override the timing and the staging, but it still does most of it auto staging so that you can go a lot faster on the cases. But yeah, it's a great question.
Auto staging is always more convenient.
It's more
Yeah.
convenient, but it doesn't have as much control. So we want to be able to give you the convenience, but then when you need that level of control, be able to open up that level of control and go in and play with it. So we're in the process right now of getting that worked out for us. So it's a great question. Any other last questions before we wrap it up for tonight? What time is it where you are in India?
It's 6:45 in the morning.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Any other last questions before we end for tonight? All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you guys being here. And if you do have any follow-up questions, or if you have any cases that you would like me to look at next time, or with you personally, feel free to reach out to me on the WhatsApp group or via email. All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.